permission.
Oh, okay. I might have messed up with your sharing ability. Don't worry about it. Good afternoon, technically, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the Next Northwest webinar, Future-Proof Your Analytics Stack, with our good friend Zeke from Data Speaks. He is going to talk about setting your business up to succeed in the age of AI. And we have a couple event sponsors, including Data Speaks. This is one of their final event sponsorships. We thank them for their support. Thank you, Zeke. And Amazon as well. So if you like to support somebody's rocket ship habit, keep buying from Amazon. But they've been a fantastic partner for us, and we're grateful for their support. And before we hand it over to Zeke, I just want to reiterate that our sponsors make this possible. Clients, one of our key sponsors, you'll see them at the networking events. We have a couple events coming up, a social on the 9th and on the 22nd. Up in Seattle, we have a social as well. These are all on the website, nextnorthwest.org. Our big event, Cascadia Awards. Let me go back real quick. And the next webinar is June 19th. It's how to negotiate with difficult clients. In August, after a quick break over the summer, how to grow your business through sales strategies. I'll go back again. This is automatic. I forgot how to turn this off. And our big Northwest Open Golf event is in September. If you're not a member, you should join Next Northwest if you want to learn and grow through networking and learning events. The prices start $100 per person, and they go down from there in group discounts plus student discounts. And if you're interested in getting your brand in front of people, like Zeke is with Data Speaks, check out our sponsorships. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Zeke and let him do his thing. He's going to share his screen and teach us a few things. Thanks, everybody. Take it away, Zeke.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, let's do this. All right, guys. I'm really excited to be talking to you about my favorite topic, which is analytics, but especially how to apply these insights to make better decisions and grow faster without making so many mistakes, without failing so much, without trying to throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks, So very quickly, because I know that you're not here to hear my background, but I think it's relevant to the information about to share. But my background is in economics and statistics at the University of Buenos Aires, and then machine learning Stanford. I spent the last 20 years building machine learning, AI, and analytic solutions for over 200 companies, and using these solutions to help C-level executives make informed decisions with confidence. I've been in the agency world as well. I had an agency that I started in 2007, sold in 2015. Since then, I've been consulting. And in 2020, I started Data Speaks because I wanted to help marketing teams make better decisions. I realized that the level of sophistication that leaders needed to make great decisions was only really available to the big companies, the enterprise sector. And I wanted to bring this in a way that would be accessible and affordable to the rest of agencies and brands. So a little bit about what I'm going to cover today. So the first thing I think is very important to talk about is, why is it that being a data-driven marketer is so hard in today's landscape? I want to address how the advertising game has changed substantially in the last decade. I want to give you some tips on how to help advertising platforms perform better. I want to talk to you about attribution, what it is, why it matters, and how to do it right. Incrementality testing, how to apply the gold standard of science to measure marketing performance. And I want to wrap it up with some practical tips, some keys that will help you foster a data-driven culture in your company. We're going to have Q&A at the end, so happy to go into your questions, and I'll jump right in. So a little bit about the challenge of the modern marketer, So this is mind-blowing to me. 84% of marketers agree that making data-driven decisions is essential to success. However, only 17% of them actually trust the data that guides those decisions. So why is this? So first and foremost, we are living in a complex world. Customers interact with us on multiple channels, using multiple devices, and following them across the internet is no longer possible as it was 10 years ago. There are a lot of privacy issues. After the death of third-party cookies, traditional tracking like pixels is highly unreliable. And we have all these discrepancies, different platforms with different reports telling different stories. And the reality is that the advertising game is no longer the same. Algorithms are doing automatically a lot of what media buyers used to do manually. So picking keywords, pausing campaigns, adjusting bids, they're doing that for you. And getting great performance in advertising really comes down to three things. First one is creatives. So it's as important as always to tell a great story to hook consumers and tell them in just a few seconds why it is that you're different and why they should click on the ad that you show. Another one is budget allocation. So say, for example, if you have $100, what is the optimal way to allocate that budget towards the right channels, the right campaigns, the right tactics to maximize the output of your marketing? And finally, we have the data flow. So even though algorithms are doing a lot of the stuff we used to do manually, to do that very well, they need to have as much conversion data as possible. And because of all the privacy restrictions, that is not as straightforward as it used to be. So a little bit about how advertising algorithms work. They use your conversion data to learn what converts. So which audiences are buying, which ones are not, which creatives are compelling those people to purchase. And the reality is that the more that data they have, the better they perform. So one of the benefits of this is a shorter learning phase. So if your algorithms only have half of the data they need to optimize themselves, it's going to take twice as long for the learning phase. So you're going to be spending twice as much money to get to a point where the campaigns that you just launched are going to be performing at a certain threshold. Another issue here is that not only do you need to get them to a place where they figure out what creatives to show to which audiences, but you have to maintain that supply of critical mass of conversions. So for example, Meta recommends 50 conversions per week per campaign. And what this allows you to do essentially is to put more of your budget towards your first party audiences and their lookalikes. So it could be your customers, people who added to cart, and their lookalikes. You're essentially telling the platforms, go find me more people like these, rather than having to rely on broad targeting or even interest-based. So you can be much more successful by helping platforms know these are my customers, these are the people engaging on my website, and targeting those rather than the whole universe. This is a graphic that I really like showing that essentially shows when you are collecting about half of the conversions because of privacy settings and pixels. You have your first party audiences and then their lookalikes, but the majority of the budget goes towards interest-based and broad audiences. When you have larger first party audiences, that results in larger lookalike audiences of those primary audiences, and much less of your budget has to go towards Meta, for example, to figure it out for you. So in terms of their ability to track, we have two options. One is the native third-party pixels that platforms give you, whether it's Meta, Google, TikTok, or to do first-party tracking. When we do first-party tracking, we're essentially using JavaScript, so it can't be blocked, or at least it's 99% effective. And then we're using a server-side process to send those conversions to the platforms, ensuring that we track as many conversions as possible. We keep our reporting accurate, in sync, and we give platforms what they need to optimize their own performance. So third-party pixels only capture 58% of conversions for the reasons we already talked about, like ad blockers, browser privacy settings, and so on. And first-party tracking is 99% effective. That means it's 70% more conversions or end events tracked. So there are two ways you could do this. I'll start with the low-cost way, and then I'll tell you an alternative you have to that. So first method is using a server-side implementation. So this is essentially how it works. Rather than having 15 different third-party pixels on your website that only works 60% of the time, you have one first-party tracking, making your website load much more efficiently, faster, reducing the room for error, and then streaming those conversions to anywhere you want. So most platforms already have a way to do that. So for example, in Meta, this is called CAPI, or Conversions API. Google calls it Enhanced Conversions. TikTok calls this Events API. And really at this point, most major platforms already provide a server-side conversion tracking API. Now, it's possible to deploy this through a server-side GTM, Google Tag Manager implementation. I put the link here, but you could also search for server-side GTM. You're going to find how this works. And it gives you two different ways to do it. So one is through a folder on your site. So the key to not be blocked is you want the tracking to be on the same server as your website. And you have two different ways to do this. You can do this through your folder. So it could be site.com/track, for example. This is the recommended because it's more bulletproof than subdomains, but a subdomain is also much, much better than using third-party pixels. So in this case, track.site.com. Either way, you're going to need a CDN. Only with the folder, you're going to need a CDN. Like Cloudflare is one example. If you use a subdomain, you could configure this automatically through your hosting service. And it's important to know that some platforms like Shopify, for example, doesn't really allow you to use third-party CDNs because they're in itself a CDN. So in that case, your only option is to use a subdomain. Then the second method is a customer data platform. So in addition to everything we talked about, sending more conversions to the platform, you have a number of additional benefits. One of them is identity resolution. So for example, if we know that you open a certain email on your mobile device and then you visited the website or your laptop, a CDP will help you unify those two sessions under one user. And from that point on, any activity from either device is going to be under that unified customer profile. It also gives you a single view of the customer journey. So we have, for example, a Facebook ad click, something added to the cart, an email opened, all this on different devices, as you can see. And this is really useful for understanding what I call this micro optimization as opposed to macro. So this is qualitative data where it would take a long time to aggregate thousands of conversions, but I can learn a lot by just going through a few of them, and AI makes it very, very easy to query and ask questions. So how many of my conversions had a YouTube video in them? How many of those were testimonials, and so on. Another huge benefit of having a CDP is that it gives you the ability to have a multi-source audience building. So in this case, we are creating a segment where is, for example, people who view products based on Google Analytics data, where the category was hockey gear in the last 90 days, and they clicked an email about hockey gear, and they also clicked a Facebook ad about hockey remarketing. And this allows us then to export this to like Facebook, Google, TikTok, and any audiences we want. And this is extremely powerful because we're really collecting all the user behavior we have. And in this case, for example, if we didn't have this and we were trying to build this audience on Google, we just couldn't, because we could have access to website activity, but there's no way that Google would have visibility into what the user is doing on Facebook ads or email. So this allows you to build a much more comprehensive profile. And connected to that is the ability to do cross-channel orchestration, where you could think about the whole customer journey, which channels, tactics are best in each case, how you can tell your story in a more comprehensive way, depending on the stage of where the customer is at, and be much more successful by being present in more channels with a cohesive message across. Oh, and yeah, a couple of solutions here. I used segment.com for a long time. I'm a big fan of that. Router Stack is a great option that gives you a lot more flexibility. It's a little more difficult to implement, but really, really powerful. Is data warehouse native, meaning that with Segment, all your data goes to Segment. You never actually own your data. That to me is an issue. With Router Stack, you actually get all your data in the data warehouse. You build your profiles there. You own your own data. If tomorrow you don't want to work with them anymore, you still get to keep the data. That to me is really, really important. And of course, we do this as well. All right, so attribution, the key to superior performance. So I want to talk about this. I think it's really important. More than half of the marketing dollars from US-based brands are spent on digital ads. And most of them are still optimizing based on pixel data. Pixel data, as we discussed, has an error margin of plus minus 41%. So what this means, I'll compare here the error margin of first-party data on the left and third-party data on the right. So let's say that these two are saying that we have a ROAS of 5, and we decide based on that we want to invest $10,000. If the ROAS was actually 5, revenue would be $50,000. Nothing can predict that with 100% accuracy, but I think it's really important to see that if we work with first-party data, okay, it's not 50,000, but it's going to be somewhere between 47,000 and 52,000. If you are using third-party data, it could be as little as 29,000 or as much as 70,000. And that might be the difference between choosing to invest in that and move on and invest elsewhere. So that's when I show this to people, it's very eye-opening, because pixels are so ubiquitous. Everybody has gotten used to them, and to the point where why would we question the way everybody does it? And we all know about the death of third-party cookies. We know they're not reliable, but I think most marketers don't quite understand how bad, how inaccurate that they actually are. So what is it that makes them so unreliable? So we kind of talked about part of this, which is 42% of conversions are untracked. 38% of conversions are missed because they happen outside the attribution window. So for example, in Meta, the default is 7-day click, 1-day view, meaning that if somebody found you 8 days ago, they're not going to take credit for something that they actually influenced. So this is a good example of how this works. So we have, for example, a few touch points that happen, maybe 30 days ago, 25 days ago. All these don't get any credit, and these actually get credit. And what's interesting about this is that sometimes, for example, Instagram and Facebook are the same platform. So because this Facebook click happened after Instagram, even if this was within the attribution window, the credit would go towards Facebook. In this case, YouTube and Google Ads, again, same platform, the credit would go towards the, let's call it brand search ad. But that sale wouldn't have happened if the YouTube video wouldn't have put you in front of that customer anyway. So, even when the pixels work, they're very, very deceiving in terms of what actually creates the impact. 53% of conversions are claimed by multiple channels. So Klaviyo, in this case, the email software, will take credit for this. Meta will take credit. Google will take credit. None of these pixels have access to your source of truth to know what percentage of the pie they represent. And they have no idea. For example, Google has no idea of that the user clicked on a Facebook ad before interacting with a Google ad. So that's a really big problem. This is one that it's one of the most pervasive ones, but it's the one that I noticed people talk about the least. So only 61% of conversions reported by ad platforms are truly incremental. The rest would have happened anyway. I really like showing this with this graphic. So we have three different possibilities. We have people that don't convert. We have people that convert only if they see an ad, and people that will convert anyway. This is the actual lift. People that wouldn't have converted had it not been for the ad, but converted because they saw the ad. However, platforms take credit for all of this, right? So a very common example of this is retargeting, where maybe you send an email, somebody opened the email, that person was going to buy anyway. That person also happened to see a remarketing ad early in the day. And now, that's taking credit for the sale that you would have gotten no matter what. Another example of that is brand search, where sure, the person clicked on the branded ad, but it was going to click on, they were going to click on the organic one, anyway. So it's really important to know that just because somebody saw an ad, it doesn't mean that the ad actually drove the sale, nor does it mean that the sale wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for the ad. And then pixels are just limited in terms of what they can track. So they can only track website sales. So if you sell on Amazon retail, you're really out of luck. And if you do what's called would be considered more traditional channels like connected TV, over the top, podcast, radio, again, pixels are just not going to work for you. So there are three levels of attribution. Level one is pseudo attribution. I think that if you are spending less than $10,000 a month on digital ads, this is all you need, because I think the investment in analytics and the sophistication you need is directly proportional to how much money is on the table. So pseudo attribution, what is this? So GA4, which is by default last click, it does have it, data-driven model, but if you compare it to the last click, you'll notice that it's pretty much the same. These are platform pixels. Again, they don't work most of the time. They don't talk to each other. They're not incremental. So if you're not spending much, maybe this is really all you need. Level two. To me, level two is usually you're spending somewhere between ten and $30,000 a month. And in this case, you use something that is, uh, a little bit more sophisticated, but you're still not really looking to spend a lot. So touch attribution, MTA, multi-touch attribution. So this is based on touch and not impact, as you can see from the name. Pros is you are using first-party tracking, so it's going to be more effective. You're going to get more conversions. It has access in theory to the whole customer journey. So it's going to, rather than giving 100% of the credit to the last click or 100% to each platform that claims credit, it's going to try, the best it can to assign that credit to all the different touch points in the journey. It's going to work from your source of truth. So that's an important one. What's also important to understand is that if you have, for example, three touch points in the customer journey, why would you, for example, infer that each one had exactly as much influence as the other two? So that's, it works from your source of truth, assigns to different touch points, but in a very arbitrary manner. It does prevent multiple platforms from claiming the same conversions, and it's not limited by arbitrary attribution windows. So again, big upgrade from not really doing attribution. Some of the limitations of this, again, we talked about this, it's arbitrary. It looks at how many touch points, and it tries to do it like a data-driven approach sometimes, but it's not really based on actual impact. The example that I like using here is like saying that when Michael Jordan was playing for the Bulls, you couldn't say that he was, 1/5 of all the points, right? We just know that not to be true. And it's the same here, right? Like not everything that had, that not every player that got to influence the customer did so equally. And it's not incremental. To me, this is the biggest issue, right? It's not looking at what's going to happen if you invest more in that. It's just going to divide by the number of touch points. And that's it. You're also out of luck to track anything that is not web sales from digital channels. And some examples here, Triple Whale is my favorite in this category. They're a really amazing tool. They've come a long way in terms of reporting, beautiful UI. And if you're spending somewhere between 10 and 30K a month on ads, this would be a really good choice. Level 3, this is where it starts getting a little more sophisticated. If you're spending more than 30K a month, this is the solution that I urge you to look into. So some of the pros, same as MTA. So all these apply to MMA as well. But it measures impact. To me, that's the most important one. It's incremental and can track what MTA can't. Some of the cons, it's much more complex. So you need to work with a data scientist to get it done right. I think it's important to know that although there are some low-cost solutions and even some open source projects like, Google, for example, came out with Meridian. Facebook has I forgot what it's called, but they also have an MMM open source package. The issue that I see with that kind of stuff is that you'll always get an output, but unless you're an experienced machine learning practitioner, you never know, how accurate it is or how to troubleshoot it. It might be directionally correct. It might be, off by a certain amount. But there's a little bit of an art to how to use it, so this is one of the, in my view, this is the main reason companies have not really gone this far in terms of the level of accuracy they need and the sophistication they need to make the best decisions possible. It could be expensive. This is why I decided to found DataSpeaks, because back in the day, you just couldn't do it for less than 100K a year. And that's really out of the question for most companies. And now it's for maybe for $2,500 a month, you can have an amazing model built for you, custom built, and so on. So another potential issue with media mix modeling is that when it's not customized, when say for example you sell furniture and you have the same model out of the box than the accountant that lives next door. Those are two very different business models. So if you're not taking into account all the particular aspects of a business, the customer segments, the customer journey, product mix, shopping behavior, media mix, and so on, you're not going to get the most out of it. And the other thing is that you really need a model that is properly validated. And this goes back to you really need a data scientist to run this kind of model. If you don't validate a model, again, you're going to get an output. You'll never know if it's very accurate, somewhat accurate, or completely inaccurate. Some examples here, Recast. I love these guys. Very, very excellent service, and very sophisticated as well. Super smart people and very generous with the content they put out. Measured is the I would call him the pioneer in incrementality testing. I could recommend any of these any time of the day. They're more on the expensive side of things, which is why we're also part of this group. But you can't really go wrong with any of these options. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about media mix modeling, what it is, and why it is that it's becoming mainstream again. So it's a statistical technique to measure the impact of marketing activities to improve performance and help make budget allocation decisions. So it was developed in the 60s to study the effects of traditional media, TV, radio, and print. And the key feature of it is that it's privacy friendly. So it works with aggregated campaign spend data, and it's not dependent on user level tracking. These same techniques, by the way, are used in a variety of different scientific disciplines, to study climate change, economic policies, financial markets, medical treatments, and so on. And the reason why is so sought after these days is because spend is 10 times better at predicting revenue than pixels capturing conversions. So it really measures the impacts of ads, not just the exposure to them. So I'll give you an example to help you understand it. So let's say that you have an ice cream shop and you get 100 customers a day. You've had the business for a long time. You know that you normally get about 100 customers. You decide to hire a promoter to stand outside with a sign, and you start noticing that now you have 120 customers a day. That is, of course, 20 incremental customers, and that's the actual incrementality impact. And the promoter could say that, 50 people saw the ad, and that's, I have no reason to doubt that. That's how ad platforms claim credit. It's 50 people saw the ad, then went to the store, therefore I drove 50 customers. Of course, the math wouldn't add up for you. You really want to know, what's going to happen if I, get rid of this person? What happens if I hire another promoter, right? You want to understand how different investments can take you to the next level. Now, if you hire this person for a day and you get 120 customers, you couldn't really draw any conclusions based on one day, right? That's one observation. But when you do geosegmentation, which is what we do, which is like looking at, for example, if you sell in the United States, you have 50 different states, and times 3 years, you have 50,000 plus observations. So with that level of data in very powerful computing, a lot of computing power, you get very clear patterns to start emerging. Okay, so that's really important to know that if something happens one, it could be due to random chance, but if it happens consistently, the model gets very good at identifying those patterns. Now, not all MMMs are created equal. So what is the criteria that we use to define what makes a great model? So it's its ability to capture the true causal relationships in the data. So it can accurately predict outcomes in multiple scenarios, even those it's never seen before. So to give you an example of this, a great model should be able to tell you what's going to happen to your revenue if you increase Meta top of channel, top of funnel by 20%, decrease Google brand search by 10%. And, you can keep adding complexity to it, and the model should give you a very good estimate of what's going to happen under those conditions, even if that's never happened before. We came up with this concept of the MDQ, the $1 million question, which is what all of us marketers want to know. How much revenue can I expect for every dollar that I invest in X? So let's talk a little bit about the inputs in your model. So a model essentially has a bunch of inputs and an output. They're also called independent variables and dependent variable, but essentially you have marketing activities or things that influence your sales, and then usually have an outcome, a business outcome. So it could be sales, it could be customers, it could be new customers. Really you can track whatever you want, but it really is about figuring out how all these different factors influenced a given outcome. So for sure, you want to have your paid media. You want to have not only your spend, but also reach and frequency. So it can identify what's the best balance between reach and frequency. Should you be reaching out to more people, fewer times, or fewer people more times? And one of the key aspects of making a great model is the feature design. So the features are also the independent variables, but this is essentially the paid media. So if you have data that is too granular, like campaign data, ad set, creative level data, that because each of those you likely have probably hundreds of different creatives, so that's going to add a lot of noise to the model, and that's not going to work for media mix modeling. At the same time, if you go to the other end of the spectrum, you have channel data, so Google, Meta, and so on. That sends a much stronger signal, but often that's not very insightful or valuable. You want to know not only that Meta is doing twice as well as Google, but you want to understand, a deeper level of insight. So the sweet spot, as we found, is a combination of tactics and channel final stage. So tactics could be Google, for example, has performance max, YouTube, brand search, non-brand search, and then the final stage, awareness, retargeting, middle of funnel. And this is different for every client, but these are some good practices. And that's really what you want to know. How much of if you have, for example, $100 to invest, how much of that do you want to invest creating demand, nurturing that demand, and closing the deals, if you want to call it that? And what are the right tactics for each of those? And what's the most optimal way to allocate those $100 to maximize the output, which in most cases is revenue? Then you also have your organic media. And really could be anything else, right? Promotions, offline activity, and external factors like economy, computer activity, weather, etc. Some of the things that you should model for is the diminishing returns. As you all know, the more you spend on a given media, the lower the ROAS becomes. We could see this here as we spend media from left to right, ROAS drops. Then we have the ad stock effect. So for example, if you run ads today, some of those people will convert today, but some people will convert, next week, the week after, and so on. And the interaction effects between different things, so if you run YouTube top of funnel awareness ads, that's going to drive direct sales, but also it's going to have an indirect effect on sales because it's going to get more people to search for your brand on Google. So you have to account for the direct and indirect effect of that. So a couple of things that you can get from your attribution model. One of them is, what percentage of your sales comes from each campaign and channel. The accuracy report where you can compare what the platform is telling you versus what the actual attribution is. The confidence intervals, this is really important because, in this case, there's a big, a wide gap between the lowest and the highest points. So, in this case, you probably want to be more cautious, with when you invest. But when the range is more narrow, you can be more bullish and, scale this a little bit faster. You want to see what to do with your budget. So, for example, it's saying increase this, decrease this, increase this, right? So I think that's one of the key aspects of this. You could see recommendations, what to increase, what to decrease, by how much, what you can expect as an outcome. And you should be able to play around with different what if scenarios to, plan and forecast accordingly. We talked about the diminishing returns, but this to the left is one of my favorite charts where you essentially see at the top of the mountain, this is where this is the optimal spend that maximizes your profit. So if you're to the left, you need to scale up. If you're to the right, you scale down. Super intuitive. And you also want to understand the right balance between frequency and reach. So in this case, for example, we want to reach 2.1 times per week to each customer, and that's what's going to maximize the ROI. We don't want to oversaturate each person. Finally, customer lifetime value. So being able to break this down by source. Not all channels deliver the same quality of customers. So one of them is, figuring out not only the average order value, but how that's going to increase over time. And we always say it's not enough to make decisions based on data. You want to use data to validate that the decisions you make are actually delivering the outcomes you expect. So you want to, for example, in this case, you see that as you decrease spend, you see red, that means that you shouldn't be decreasing spend. And as you increase it again, you see blue, that means that profit is actually increasing. So as long as you see blue, keep doing what you're doing. If you see red, you're going in the wrong direction. All right, so I want to be mindful of our time. We have about 10 minutes left. I have 2 slides on incrementality testing, which is a way that we can validate our model using real world experiments. I also want to make sure that there's enough time for Q&A. So let me ask here if you guys have any questions. Ken, let me ask you. We want to do where people ask questions live. Do you want them to type them in the chat? What's the best way to do that? And if
They
there's no
can,
questions, I can always, show the two slides we have left.
yeah, so I would say unless there's some questions, you can unmute yourself to shout out or use the chat. But I know Lauren is interested in seeing the power of incrementality. So let's give everybody a second to chime in before we move on to these slides to finish out.
Mhm.
Anybody have any questions for Zeke before we wrap up or finish on these slides? All right, I'd say they want to hear more about the incrementality and hearing about traditional media, how it fits into this mix.
Of course. So I'm gonna address that question first. Media mix modeling works for all channels. So connected TV, over the top, radios, influencers. So really, what you do is you look at when the ads are being delivered, and it doesn't really matter that it's an offline channel, because really what we're saying is there's a certain number of people that are being reached every day, certain frequency, certain spend. The most important thing, of course, is to make sure that the spend is allocated as the ads are being delivered, not as you as a brand are being billed. So maybe you're billed, $10,000 once a month, but your ads are delivered at a rate of $333 a day for 30 days, right? So we want to do it in we want to model it in the way that it's being received by the consumers, not necessarily the way you're being billed by a brand. I want to jump into incrementality then. So incrementality is really based on the gold standard of science, which is randomized controlled trials. And the most basic example of this we're all familiar with is, you grab a group of people, you split it in half, or two different groups, but with similar characteristics. One takes the pill, the other one doesn't take the pill. What is the incremental improvement of those who actually took the pill? So geosegmentation provides the ideal experiment conditions. So group A sees the ad, group B doesn't see the ad. So that helps us isolate the effect of the variable that we want to study. So in econometrics, we say ceteris paribus, which is Latin for all other things being equal. And this is, exactly what we're trying to do here. We are not doing one thing now, one thing next month. We're doing at the same time, everybody exposed to the same marketing. The only difference is that some see the ad, some don't see the ad. So in this case, I think for Michigan, Indiana, and Vermont, for about 8 days, we're running this experiment. You could see here that it's a holdout. Holdout is essentially called going dark. So you just turn off the spend. You can see the spend goes to zero, and you see how the revenue actually goes down. So you look at what the revenue was pre-experiment, in this case 20,000, and it went down to 6. So you know that the lift driven by the media is 14. So holdout is one of the experiments that you could do where it's very useful for estimating the ROAS at the current ad spend, but you could also do a scale up where you say, I'm gonna spend 25, 50% more, and you estimate the incremental ROAS at the higher budget. There are 3 phases to this. So first, the design of the experiment. So this is where our platform determines the geos that are going to be treated and how long you need to run the experiment for to collect a large enough sample size to be statistically significant. And essentially, it's going to pick geos that are a good representation of the whole population, but only account for a small fraction of your sales. For example, if you have a lot of sales in California or New York, it's not going to mess with those states. And you can run up to 3 tests at any given time. So it's smart enough that we'll figure out that. Then the treatment is actually going on the platforms, pausing things or increasing spend for those particular geos. And finally, the model automatically analyzes that for you. So we use a synthetic control methods that essentially is measuring the gap between the actual sales and what the sales were expected to be had the treatment not been applied. So this is calculated as the weighted average of the control geos. So essentially it's saying, everything is kind of going in this direction. If you hadn't done what you did, these states would have accounted for, this much revenue. However, with the treatment, this is the difference, and it helps you measure the gap. The other thing to know is that incrementality tests and media mix models work together. So incrementality tests are in fact a very, very powerful way of through real world experiments to calibrate media mix models. So I'm not going to go into a lot of the details, but I'll be sharing the slides. I think what's important to know is that our clients who only use modeling have increased their ROAS 22%, which I mean, it's not huge, but also it's fairly substantial. However, those that combine modeling with incrementality have increased 35%, and that's a 59% boost from only doing modeling. And because you can't always do an actual incrementality experiment, sometimes it's too expensive, or your team doesn't want to do it, or whatever reason. It's really important that your model is able to learn from natural experiments as well. So as you increase or decrease across all your markets, you should still be able to figure out the impact of those budget adjustments. And finally, guessing versus modeling versus measuring. So I think a good example of this is that if you're using third-party pixels, I think it's more like educated guessing. So if you want to determine somebody's weight, third-party pixels are like eyeballing the person based on their looks and, guessing based on what we know about the world. We might be, close. We don't know. With mixed media modeling is saying, predicting based on reliable signals. So if I know you're 5'10" male, you lift weights 3 times a week, there's a 90% chance you're between 170 and 190. So I can get much closer this way. And measuring it is putting them on the scale and knowing for sure. Incrementality experiments don't replace MMMs. They don't really account for interaction effects. So they look at a channel in isolation, whereas media mix modeling looks at the impact of a channel within a given system. And they're a snapshot in time, whereas media performance changes over time. And I will leave these because I know we're running out of time, but I think this is also really, really important, which is 3 keys to foster a data-driven culture. The first one is you need accurate data. If people don't trust your data, they're just not going to use it to make decisions. You want it to be easy to access. So if you have to log in to 12 different platforms because your data is scattered all over the place, people are not going to do it. So having all-in-one solution, and there's a lot of low-cost solutions for this, is really important. Having the ability to chat with the AI, ask questions, get answers, really, really powerful. And create a habit. Have a regular cadence. Maybe it could be once a week, once a month, whatever works for you. And make sure that each team knows what metrics matter, so they know what to optimize for. Finally, focus on learning, not grading. If people go into these meetings feeling like, they're going to get in trouble if they don't hit their numbers, or, it's just not going to be very productive. People need to be looking forward to these and, with the, philosophy that, we learn from every experience, good or bad, and we adjust. These are all things we talked about, but I'll just leave them here on the screen. And finally, I'll give you the actual link where you can download the slides, including that last slide with the recap. And I invite you to get in touch either by email or LinkedIn. And if there's any questions I can answer in terms of analytics, AI, machine learning, attribution, incrementality, happy to help.
Thank you so much, Zeke. We appreciate your time and your insights. And we're getting a lot of thanks. And everybody can find you at dataspeaks.ai, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and I'll add that to the chat right before we sign off. Want to thank everybody for your time, and please remember to sign up for our next few events. We've got a couple socials, and we've got the big Cascadia Awards. Go ahead and click on the link in chat to visit more of the events. Follow up with Zeke as well with any questions, and know that we will share a recording of this presentation with attendees and others to get the word out about analytics. So thank you everybody for your time, and we will see you at the next webinar at the very latest in June. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Zeke. Good to see you.